everything's on the skateboard. I think everything's on the skateboard so far, right?
We're gonna have fun signing slips tonight. School's back in. You ready? Good evening, and welcome to the October 18th meeting of the City of Vista Planning Commission. Would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Aguilar? Come on, speak.
Ready to begin? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Chow, roll call.
Chairman Rosler,
Oh, here.
Vice Chair Grimm, Commissioner Aguilera,
Here.
Commissioner Garrettson,
Here.
Commissioner Hastings,
Here.
Commissioner Looney, Commissioner Savage,
Here.
Student Commissioner Herrera, Student Commissioner Childs, all present.
Thank you. Commissioners, you've been provided the minutes from our September 6th meeting. If there are no changes, can we hear a motion to approve? Commissioner Grimm?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Aguilar?
I'll second it.
All right. It's been moved and second to approve the minutes of our September 6th meeting. Please cast your vote and lock it in. And the motion passes unanimously of all the commissioners. So next item on our agenda are changes to the agenda. Ms. Chow?
Yes, good evening, Chairman Rosler. The change tonight, we'd just like to go ahead and reverse the order. We have public hearing item number 1 shown right now, which is the banquet hall P220078. We would like to have the discussion item D1, the skateboard ramps discussion P220353 go first in light of the audience to be able to give them the opportunity to speak on this item. So we would like to go ahead and reverse that with the commission's approval.
Any objections from the commission? All right, very good. Does the audience understand? We're reversing the order of our items tonight. D1, the discussion item on skateboards, we'll take first, and then we'll have our public hearing on the banquet hall second. The next item on our agenda is oral communications. This is time that the commission sets aside for members of the public to address the commission on items that are not on our agenda. I have no speaker slips. Anyone wishing to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move ahead to our discussion item. We're going to run the discussion item similar to our public hearings. If you wish to address the commission on this item, you need to fill out a speaker slip. They're out in the hallway. And when we will have a staff report, we'll have questions from the commission of staff, and then I will open it up to people who have filled out the discussion or the speaking slips. I call them in order that we've received them, and you'll have 3 minutes to provide us with your views. Let me emphasize, this is not an open forum on this item. It is somewhat a formal discussion amongst the commissioners to give staff direction on what we should recommend to the city council. So speaker slips, make sure you cover all your items. If somebody before you has talked about an item that you agree with, just say, I agree with the previous speaker, and move on to other items that are on your list. Okay? Again, you'll have 3 minutes, and we'll move on. After the public testimony, we'll open it up to discussion amongst the commissioners, and then we will give staff direction on how to proceed. I think that covers it. Mr. Conley, your report, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. John Conley, Community Development Director. With me is Amanda Guy, Assistant City Attorney. The item we have before us for discussion this evening is skateboard ramps in residential zones. The city has recently received a number of complaints related to larger scale skateboard ramps within residential zones, and so it's been referred to the Planning Commission for discussion to obtain some direction on whether or not we should more fiercely regulate this use. This is primarily focused on skate ramps that exceed 5 to 6 feet in height, or kind of what the average fence height is in residential zones, because these are larger scale structures and have caused some community concerns. There are 2 known locations within the city of larger scale ramps that exceed 5 to 6 feet. We notified all the surrounding property owners and the subject property owners of the discussion tonight. So skateboard ramps in our zoning code are currently regulated as an accessory use within a residential zone. They're regulated similar to a play structure or recreational equipment in a private yard. The building division does not permit these structures because they're not habitable, but they do have to meet accessory structure setbacks, which are generally 5 feet from the side and rear property line. So the staff is seeking a recommendation this evening from the commission as to future regulatory requirements for these ramps or restrictions on their use. This is a photo of the existing known locations, or aerial photos of the 2 known locations. I'm not disclosing the exact location, but you can see in the rear yards of these residential neighborhoods, there are some fairly large skate ramps that have existed for some time. So the Planning Commission's discussion tonight can focus on 4 options as outlined in the staff report, or we're happy to discuss other options if the commission would like. The 4 options that are laid out in the staff report I'll cover for the commission and the audience this evening. The first is to take no action, which would maintain the existing regulations for these ramps and treat them as an ancillary residential use. Again, we would not require a building permit, and they would have to meet accessory structure setbacks, which are generally 5 feet from the side and rear property line. The second option is to require a ministerial approval, which would essentially be an over-a-counter or administrative approval. It could be done through a zoning permit or a building permit. It would be allowed in specified zones if the commission wanted to allow it in certain residential zones, with established regulatory standards that would be dictated by the commission or determined by staff based on your direction. The standards could be defined this evening in the discussion, or you can give us an idea of what you'd like to try to control, and the staff can come back with recommendations to be considered in a formal code amendment. The third option is to require discretionary approval. This is a permit that would go through the planning department. It would have to be submitted with a site plan showing location and size and structural components of the ramp itself. It could be identified as a minor or special use within the zone, meaning that it would be subject to a minor use permit or a special use permit. As you know, those go through a discretionary review process with the planning staff. We evaluate them and we bring them forward to the Planning Commission or the zoning administrator under certain circumstances, typically with conditions of approval that regulate their use, and there's a public hearing and they're voted upon by the decision-making body. And the fourth option is to prohibit them. The commission may recommend a prohibition of ramps meeting certain parameters or sizes within certain zones, again, that could be determined by the commission. Something to consider is a nonconformity requirement. So the existing ramps that are constructed and operating in the city would be considered nonconforming upon the adoption of any new rules regulating these structures. Nonconforming means that it They existed at the time that the zoning requirements were adopted, and so they may be grandfathered, so to speak, and be able to remain. Within our code, the nonconformity requirements allow those uses to remain for up to 3 years before the city can take action under the zoning that's adopted or the new rules that are adopted. That's for most land uses as determined by our code. If the commission or the council wanted to reduce that time period, we call it an amortization period, we could evaluate that from a legal perspective and come back with a recommendation. In other words, it could be less than 3 years if it's legally permissible. The recommendations from the Planning Commission this evening can be brought to the City Council if we need to obtain additional direction or final indication of what the requirements should be. If the Commission's direction is fairly clear and it's straightforward from the staff perspective, we can just bring it back in a formal code amendment. If a code amendment is proposed, it would have to go through public hearings at both the Planning Commission and the City Council before it would be final and enacted. And in that case, those nonconformity requirements would come into play. And that completes my staff presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Very good. Questions of Mr. Connolly? Commissioner Grimm?
Yes, I assume that the major difference between the second and the third options, ministerial and minor use permit, is that basically the ministerial permit, there are certain standards laid out. If it meets those, staff can sign it off and it would go on through. Where, let me finish and you can chime in where I'm incorrect, but which probably will happen. But in terms of the minor use permit or special use permit, that would allow us to tailor it to the property with conditions, where you can't condition a
That's
ministerial
correct.
permit.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that you said actually is accurate. In a ministerial
You
approval.
sure?
Yeah. In a ministerial approval, we would have pre-prepared requirements that would apply either in the code or in a policy that the staff would automatically apply as part of any ministerial approval. They would apply across the board. They wouldn't be able to be customized or changed in any way. They would just apply to every use that's applied for. In a discretionary action, yes, they could be tailored to the property. It could be dependent upon lot size, location, proximity to other homes or uses, and there could be conditions included that could regulate the time they're used or the type of facility that's used, et cetera.
Thank you.
Commissioner Looney?
Thank you. John, typically on an accessory structure, that also includes calculations for lot coverage. So would that still apply to this issue where if we've got a 500 square foot ramp, will that 500 feet go towards the lot coverage calculation for each parcel?
Yes, so there are certain zones that have lot coverage requirements. Some of the larger zones, like the half acre and larger zones, do not. But in the smaller zones, there is a 60% lot coverage. And in the event that this use was permissible, then yes, the calculation of the size of the ramp would go toward the lot coverage requirement.
Okay. The city has a noise ordinance, so how might that come into play if there were ramps built and it was used into the evening hours? How does that come into play?
So any use in a residential zone has to comply with the noise ordinance today, so that wouldn't be a new requirement per se, but existing ramps would still have to comply with those requirements. The noise standards are based on the zone you're in. They change from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. They're lower, and from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. they're a bit higher to allow for daytime uses versus nighttime uses. The noise ordinance is based on a 1 hour average noise standard, so it's not if you just hit that level in a 2-second, burst of sound that you exceed the noise ordinance. You have to set up a digital meter at the property line. You have to record the noise level over the 1 hour period, and then you have to determine what that average noise level is, and if that average level exceeds the standard, then you have a noise violation.
Okay. And the last question I have is regarding lighting. Are any of these ramps that are currently installed, do they have lights on them? And if we go through one of these 4 options, would lighting become an issue on some of the, let's say if they went with a discretionary permit, would lighting be a part of that?
So absolutely, lighting is reviewed as part of any application. Our lighting standards for residential zones are generally fairly basic. They have to be directed down and not shine onto adjacent properties. There's a light level standard that you can't exceed at the adjacent property line. I'm not aware that either of the 2 existing ramps have lights. We haven't received complaints regarding lighting. It's mostly been about noise and activity associated with the ramps. I believe at least one of the property owners, maybe both, are here tonight, and you can ask them that. But that hasn't been a subject of concern for the most part, as far as we understand. But yes, lighting would be something that would be subject to review, whether ministerial or discretionary. A discretionary permit, though, would have more teeth in terms of how it's regulated.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Garrettson.
Yes, Mr. Conley, what is the cost to the applicant of each of these, especially the first 3?
Good question. So taking no action, there's no cost because we don't permit them now, and so there wouldn't be a permit requirement. A ministerial approval would just be probably subject to a zoning approval or a building permit. Building permits are generally calculated based on the value of the structure, so it's probably less than $1,000. I'm going to guess somewhere around $500 to get a building permit for a structure, depending on the size of it. If you wanted to require discretionary approval, a minor use permit is currently about $3,400 application, and a special use permit is currently about a $9,000 application fee.
All right, thank you. One other question. Now, the present zoning and regulations, would they include volleyball, basketball, and playgrounds? And if we incorporated any of these options, would those options cover those particular sports?
So the discussion tonight is really focused on skate ramps. Volleyball, basketball, other recreational uses in private yards are not regulated under our zoning code. Again, those are all considered accessory uses and do not require permits. So if the commission wanted to incorporate other uses into this discussion, we certainly could, but that wasn't the purpose this evening.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Aguilar.
I think I just have one question right now. If we do a discretionary approval, that can also be revoked if violations are made, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we know, on the 2 ramps that are in existence right now, do we know if there are, I thought I saw something about lessons or training going on at some of these ramps?
We do have some active code violations on one of the locations that code enforcement is currently working on, and that's really largely what brought this to discussion tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Hastings.
This is sort of a process question, I guess. If we're considering all of these different types of approvals or lack of approvals, which seem to be focused on the skateboard and noise, would there be something different about the possible increases in activity? Or would that go into one of changing the regulations also?
In terms of the increase in activity that results from putting a skateboard ramp in your backyard?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be part of this action.
So if you invited 100 people to watch the thing and they had to park somewhere and not cheer too loud when somebody won, you know, how is that?
So there are a number of regulatory requirements that come into play with regard to crowds. We have other ordinances that regulate, you know, parties in residential zones. There's parking requirements, there's noise requirements. So there's a number of codes that we can apply to that. But in the event that there was a discretionary permit requirement established, we could address those issues as part of the discretionary permit. That's really the only avenue that we would have to place additional conditions on such a use. Any of the other options would not really provide us that flexibility.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Connolly, the proposal tonight, you mentioned a height of 5 or 6 feet based on our fence height. Well, I'm going to ask the audience that. If we did 6 feet with a ministerial approval, could we write into the conditions or into the ordinance that they have umbrella insurance to cover the property? And then fencing for security. I'm concerned about an attractive nuisance when the owners aren't there, people sneaking in and using the ramps. Those things sound like they, from your discussion, would be better under discretionary approval than the ministerial.
Under discretionary review, yes, we could have insurance requirements and we could address security as part of the approval through the conditions.
Okay, very good. All right. Any other questions?
Commissioner Rossler, can I add to that comment? So we can also require things like insurance and, say, fencing, fully fenced-in yard requirements. They just need to be very clear and objective standards that are used in the ministerial process. So they have to be really like a one-size-fits-all objective standard that can be applied across the board. I think that's the tricky part of using the ministerial process, and what John's getting at is you have more flexibility with the discretionary process.
Very good. Thank you. All right. I'm going to call the speakers now. And a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes. For me personally, the 20-foot height of the ramp, two existing ramps, I think, is too high. I don't know what the standard should be. I want to know if there's an industry standard for how high they should be. We've received some information where it looked like the ramp was only 3 or 4 feet, and there were little kids using the ramp. That seems reasonable to me. But 20 feet, 5 feet from my property line, I'm concerned about. So I want to know if there's an industry standard as you move up from a beginner, amateur to the professional level. How does that work? So if you could cover that for me, I'd appreciate it. So the first speaker is, I believe, Greg L. Witt, and followed by Tony Hutchison. Mr. Witt, you have...
All right, I got 3 minutes to save the world. Okay. My name is Greg Witt. I'm a resident of Vista. I am a local business owner. I am a skateboarder. I am a former professional skateboarder, and I have 20-plus years experience as a private backyard ramp owner, and I served for 3 years as a co-chair for the ASTM Skate Park Standards Committee for public skate parks nationwide, which other people from the skate park industry serving today will know that that's largely not governed, but that may be an area where we could add value in this discussion. And I do want to let you know that all of these ramps far exceed the very loose ASTM safety guidelines, just since you mentioned standards. I want to make a note that I moved my family from Minnesota and to San Diego specifically solely for the access to these very special ramps that exist in Vista, like hundreds of others that live in the area now that have actually relocated here for ramps as special as the height of the non-concerning height of 20 feet, just to be very frank with you, Rick. My goal here right now in the remaining minutes that I have is to provide several key considerations and solutions to help form the planning decisions that you're going to embark upon. Key consideration number 1 is economic impact. Like I said, many industry leaders, families, businesses have relocated here to be able to have access to these ramps that exist in the area from the 78 to the 76 from coast to the inland that I call Vert Valley, which are very special ramps that are exceeding this 5 and 6 foot high beginner level. The people that ride these ramps are experts, professionals, very advanced skateboarders that ride with waivers, with insurance, with personal insurance, and with other insurance. There is zero issue of some random kid coming on any of these ramps and creating an issue. Just wanted to go further on that. Other economic impact that I think is really important to understand is that visitors that are coming, that are qualified, that have signed these waivers, that are insured, they're spending money here in Vista that they could go spend somewhere else. They come here for this allure. Businesses, like I said, have moved from Oceanside downtown to the village of Vista to be closer to this culture. Steel Mill Coffee, I can name many. There is real economic impact at play here. Number two, social impact, probably most important. Vert skaters represent very responsible citizenship. We're, for the most part, not younger kids, although there are a ton of future generation younger kids in this room that do follow suit with this insurance requirements and all the other things that I talked about. But in general, the people that build and own and govern and mainly ride these ramps, we're also the people that go to the other public skate parks. You know, we help police and self-police the streets and the public skate parks that you've built. You guys are cutting edge. You're ahead of the curve. You're doing amazing things. But it's important to understand how this all works as a symbiotic relationship. I want to give you some specific examples. When adults that skate vert, that go to these ramps, go to also to the public skate parks, we're the people that are there picking up the trash. We go in the skate parks. We skate in the skate parks with the kids. We're not afraid. We don't sit in our cars like the other parents that sit at home in front of their TVs. We go in those skate parks. We skate too. We're watching for alcohol and drugs and making sure that people aren't doing that. You know, we're the ones that mentor the idiots that go to the VP skate park and throw eggs at kids. You know, we stop them, and we don't go to kick their butts. We go to stop them and talk to them and try to give them another way, another perspective. And we try to teach the etiquette. Like I said, other moms and dads just sit in their cars because they can't risk that, type of abuse on their bodies, right? Other social impact conditions are that people like myself and my family, and I'm sure many others here, we send these same values that I'm talking about into the schools, into Vista High, into Roosevelt. And we send our kids with those same values. And I think this is really important. I don't want you to forget that. I know you know how much it's cleaned up here, but there's a long way to go. Number three, cultural significance. And I think it's important maybe if we looked at cultural significance as a banner on the wall right here, to not forget, because you're not gonna forget economic impact. You're not gonna forget the social impact. But the cultural significance of these ramps, they're part of a very, very delicate ecosystem providing riding terrain that cities are just not equipped to build and maintain. This ecosystem is small driveway ramps and rails, jump ramps, then the bowls and everything that you've done such a great job providing. But then we have these vert ramps that are for the more advanced people, the people progressing the sport. These are the things that make Vista magical. These are the ramps that we're talking about tonight that make Vista a magical place to be for the skateboarders, the families, and the businesses, the hundreds of people that are coming here for this. So what are the other aspects of this?
You need to
Think about this. I know you're going to call time, but the X Games are broadcast out of Vista. Are you aware of that? That's pretty amazing. There's Olympic skateboarders. Probably more Olympic skateboarders in the U.S. are in Vista, Oceanside, Carlsbad than anywhere else in the country because of these ramps.
So let me ask you a question so you can continue here. The professionals that you're talking about, the people that have insurance, do that, and the two ramps that were shown tonight, do they skate on those ramps? Or are they I understand that Tony Hawk has a
Yeah.
facility here in the industrial zone. And I want to know if the professionals skate in the neighborhood pipes.
Yes,
Okay?
yes, absolutely. And here are some solutions.
Wrap up your
Yeah, I'm going to
comments.
wrap up really quick. Solutions for considerations are good news is that they're win-win. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There's ramp soundproofing that can be done. There's music use guidelines that can be put in place. There's usage timeframes that can be put in place. One of you mentioned aesthetic and decor. There's something to certain limitations that can be done. Plus, there's always got to be an opportunity, I imagine, for friendly neighborhood policy to address any sort of unique circumstances between neighbor and so forth. So I know that was a lot to say and I had more to say, but thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support of the skateboard backyard ramps and the culture and the reason why, Vista is a special place for our families and our businesses to live and coincide. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Forgot to mention. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention there's not supposed to be any applause tonight. I'm sorry. Tony Hutchinson, followed by Alicia Hutchinson. Not a performance. Yeah, it's not a performance. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak on the issue of backyard skate ramps in Vista. It's good to know that the city already sees this as a backyard skate ramp problem and not a backyard playground equipment problem, as evidenced by the title of tonight's discussion. What is the problem? The problem is there are no laws preventing anyone from building up to a 35-foot backyard skate ramp in Vista. These ramps invite excessive noise, crowds, traffic, parking, music, and long hours of skating. The bigger the ramp, the bigger the problem. Because of this loophole, they are also violating multiple city codes, county noise ordinances, and business permit laws and insurance policies. These backyard skate ramps are unsafe and are public nuisances. Residential zones give homeowners basic rights to personal enjoyment of life, free of public nuisances in a private setting, like excessive noise, traffic, and parties. Residential zones promote peace and quiet and feeling safe. Residential zones provide real estate investment opportunities that bring equity and financial security. They are not for hosting loud, big backyard parties with skateboards every night and weekends. They are not commercial or business zones. Backyard skate ramps belong in commercial business zones because they are attractions. Like Disneyland, they attract crowds, noise, and traffic. If backyard skate ramps are used to run a business, then they would have to be in commercial zones since they would not meet the noise criteria to be issued a home occupation permit from the city. If they want to host major skating events with corporate sponsors, they definitely need to be in a commercial zone that is equipped with the proper space between their skateboarding guests and adjacent neighborhoods. Backyard skate ramps bring down property value as evidenced by my property and the other next door neighbor to my backyard skate ramp neighbor. Both properties lost $40,000 in realized equity and or profit 5 years apart in different housing markets. The only thing they have in common is the same backyard skate ramp neighbor next door. These are the reasons why backyard skate ramps do not belong in residential zones. This goes against the city's efforts over the last several years to make Vista attractive to buy and live in. There is nothing attractive about living next to an amusement park for skateboarding. Here's the solution to the backyard skate ramp problem. Use the evidence provided to the city to make this decision in confidence. Utilize the city skate park. Skateboarders have other places to go for enjoyment of the sport. Homeowners only have their home to go to for enjoyment of life. Choose option 4 and recommend prohibiting backyard skate ramps in residential zones in Vista higher than 4 feet and limit 1 per home. A 3-foot child standing on a 4-foot ramp is still higher than a standard 6-foot neighbor fence. Finally, reduce the amortization period from 3 years to 3 months for removal of these ramps. Lastly, and most importantly, come visit my house and see and hear for yourself what you are deciding on. I live at 1280 Oak Drive. My lifelong dream of owning land in Vista has become a daily nightmare living next door to a backyard skate ramp. If the city does nothing, then my nightmare could become your nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you. Elisa Hutchinson, followed by, I think it's Dixie Moore.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for giving this matter your time and attention. Here are some points that I would like to ask you to keep in mind as you decide on how to move forward with skateboard ramps in residential areas. The ramp that is next door to us is not just used as playground equipment for family use. It is more of a training facility. The noise level prohibits relaxation, concentration, and enjoyment of our property, not only outside in our backyard, but inside of our house as well. I believe we have provided multiple recordings of the decibel levels from the activity next door, which exceed the noise ordinance in our city. The height of the structure takes away my right to privacy, even though we have a 6-foot fence. I cannot enjoy my pool and hot tub or sunbathing due to the skaters going up the ramp who skate and can peer down into my yard. The large events that are held multiple times a year with hundreds of attendees encroaching on our quiet street, music via a loud DJ also emceeing the competition all day long. Imagine coming home from a long day's work, just yearning for some peace and quiet, or wanting to read your favorite book, or study for a test, or have an important Zoom meeting. And there is no escaping the noise, even in the sanctity of your own home. There's no privacy or solitude to enjoy a nap outdoors or a private, relaxing soak in your hot tub. You can't hear yourself think, read, or enjoy some music of your choice, even though we bought a home in a residential zone. I ask that you make your decision with these things in mind, because if this type of structure and activity is continued to be allowed in Vista, your next door neighbor may be the next one to build a ramp like this and ruin your daily peace of mind as well. I believe that my concerns and requests are supported by County Ordinance 99.62, Section 36.401. Purpose: disturbing, excessive, or offensive noise interferes with a person's right to enjoy life and property and is detrimental to the public health and safety. Every person is entitled to an environment free of annoying and harmful noise. The purpose of this chapter is to regulate noise in the unincorporated area of the county to promote the public health, comfort, and convenience of the county's inhabitants and its visitors. This right of mine is being violated because this ramp and the way that it is being used, not for family personal use. I urge you, council members, please enforce existing city, county, and state laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Dixie Moore, followed by I'm sorry. What do you think?
Well, most of what I was going to talk about has already been brought up, except one thing. Where do those people park? The area I live in, there is no street parking, there is no public parking. And when you get 20, 30 people over there skateboarding, where do those 20, 30 cars park? They've been down on my private easement. I've had to go out and ask them to leave. I've had to threaten them to get the sheriffs down there to get them to leave. Short of putting a gate up with the 6 of us that live down that easement, we can't stop them unless somebody's out there all the time when those skateboarders are up there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who was it? Evandro Menez? Did I get that right? Yes. You got to print, buddy, better.
It's Evandro Menezes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Evandro Menezes, and I live in Vista for about 10 years. I'm one of the owners of the ramps. And just address what my neighbors were saying about lights. And they said that we are skating all night, or even that we don't have any more lights. I respectfully, I know some hours, we can always skating. And I know they said, and we all do, we skate all day long. And I have in my house as a training facility, which is, I teach skateboarding, and also I do skate as a professional, as my friend Elliot and everybody else. There's so much to say, then I don't even know what to say. Basically, I just have the right, I think, to enjoy my backyard the same way they enjoy. My neighbor has a padding, then he can see over to 2 or 3 other neighbors, and I don't believe he needs any permit for that. My ramp in the back, I built a 7-foot wall, and I plant a few big trees just to block that off. One reason, because I do not want to see my neighbor laying down naked in the yard. So this is one of the concerns. Also, yes, like I said, I do teaching skateboard, but not as a training facility. I have a business license that allows me to have 5 kids a day. And also, I mean, if the noise is all day, most of my neighbors are not at home all day. So I don't even know how they know then it's all day something going on in a ramp. We have a specific hours to skate, basically. And we respectfully, I always reach out to my neighbors. And I would, with events that we have, I always let them know in at least a month ahead what we're going to do over there. In terms of a parking space as well, a couple of my neighbors, they donate their front yards, which is, it has a big area, then we can park. My driveway is always, full of our cars, but we always content into the limit area from the street. My friends, when they come and skate with me, they always carpool. So we try to keep our neighborhood safe and the way it always has been. And we've been there for 10 years, and I don't think it is fair for a neighbor to move in and he can enjoy his yard the way he wanted to. But we've been there before, and now we can enjoy our backyards the way we want to. I have I brought out today the China Olympic team. So what I'm saying is, Vista is the capital it's a capital city for the vert skaters in the world. So we receive people from all over the world here. And like Whit says, we bring business to Vista. We have we definitely want to do good for the community. That's all we want to do. We want to enjoy our lives the same way they are enjoying their lives.
Let me ask you a couple of questions.
It's,
Do you offer lessons?
yes, I do.
And do you charge for those lessons?
I do.
Okay. And then do you host events throughout the year? And then approximately how many?
How many events?
Yeah.
I do 2 events.
2 events?
One for amateurs and one for pros, which is not events. It's more private event. What I do is just invitational. So it's basically a birthday party, basically.
How many people typically come to those
I
events?
limit it to 150 people.
150. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Because I
much.
try to
Anything else you'd like to tell us, or can you summarize your position for us?
Well, my position is I just would like to enjoy my backyard the same way they enjoy. I'm not here to tell one of my neighbors what time he is going to be laying down in the sun. I don't care. I don't care if he's been there all day. That's not my problem. I don't know, and I don't want to know what he's doing in his yard. So,
All right. Thank you very much.
thank you.
All right. Tony Luna, followed by Stafford Lopez.
Hello, my name is Tony Luna. I share a property line with one of the ramps, and I guess I have a unique position as I have tremendous respect for all my neighbors, including the neighbor with the ramp. And I don't have a problem with any of my neighbors. So I just thought I'd let you guys know I just hope to get along with all my neighbors, including, being next to a skateboard ramp. I don't have a problem with it. So pretty simple.
Okay. Thank you very much. Stanford Lopez, followed by Tom Payne.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanford Lopez. I also moved here from out of state for skateboarding, originally from New Jersey. I'm also a local business owner here and a former professional skateboarder. I also skate that ramp periodically from time to time and some other ramps in the area. And there's one thing I wanted to address that was mentioned before. The size of the ramp being, I guess, approximately 14, 13 feet is sort of necessary for the type of skateboarding that is happening on these ramps by professionals. Because on these smaller ramps that are smaller transitions, like even under 8 feet, the amount of, or there's limitations in what you can do when the ramp is scaled down like that. As far as for some of the concerns with, I guess, the visibility or the neighbors or the people skating the ramps having visibility into other yards, I think this could be addressed with, I guess, some trees or some kind of like bamboo trees or something that can help in that area. So it's not such a drastic, I guess, something you would have to implement, like getting rid of the ramps, where I believe they're useful for especially for professionals and amateurs that are learning to learn on those ramps, because the public ramps are definitely not anywhere near what you can get with one of these backyard ramps. They're just not. They're much too small. The type of things you could do on them are completely different. It's almost like comparing cross-country skiing to like freestyle skiing. They're completely different. But that's just what I wanted to address.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom Payne, followed by Janet Payne.
Thank you for the opportunity to listen to these issues. I'm Tom Payne. I moved to Vista from northern Wisconsin for the weather, the Huntley-Brinkley Report, and for the bucolic serenity and peace of the Vista area. When I moved here, you could see cows in 3 different places off the 78. We live pretty close to where Delphi's Corners were, where there was a big vineyard. And it was a wonderful, quiet place. I moved to Vista for that reason. previous gentleman mentioned that there's limitations on what they can do. They need these big ramps. Well, there are limitations on what you can do. One of the other speakers indicated that, well, we could put special insulation to reduce the noise. Or we always try to pick up the trash on the road. I guess sometimes they forget to do the trash on the road on Oak out in front of my house or my area. And, you know, they have an event, and then I have to go out of my lower driveway and be met by a red Tesla parked in the driveway. That's great. I'm glad those people can come and enjoy my property. But I moved to Vista to live in a residential area, and this, what they showed, I have never seen in any other state, in any other venue, that anyone would call that playground equipment. It is a professional skateboard ramp in a residential area, and I would encourage the council to shut it down. We don't need to be having these discussions depending on who our neighbors are going to be or move in. If they're not going to shut it down, then they need to really, really restrict it big time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Janet Payne, followed by, oh, gee. Alec. Is that an R?
Hi, my name's Janet Payne, and we've lived in Vista since 1987. The house we bought over here on Oak Knoll, a little street just off of Oak, we've lived there since '93, so I guess we're the old timers. We love Vista, and I want to first of all, thank you all for your service in making this a wonderful place to live. And as the previous Tony had mentioned, at first when I could hear our house yard backs up to the property of the skate ramp. And when I first could hear that clapping noise, you know, the skateboards hitting the ramps, I thought, oh, how nice. They can meet together and share that. But then as time went on, I noticed I didn't like it. I didn't like the noise. And I noticed that truly, I didn't go out in my yard and do as much yard work. It was just so noisy. And even inside my house, with the doors and windows closed, I can still hear it. And I resent that my home, being in my home, in my yard, are not as enjoyable as they used to be. Now, speaking of noise, there was a time not too long ago that I could hear that deep, vibrating sound of a helicopter. And you know how you just expect it to fly over, but it didn't fly over. And it kept getting louder and louder, and it stayed there. So I went out, and I see this, obviously, a private yellow helicopter hovering above another neighbor's house. But my brain thought this was a sniper because the guy was out on the loading skid holding something. And I ran back in the house. I thought, it's a gun. It wasn't. He was filming. He was filming the skaters. And I stood out there and watched him. I mean, he was so low. I thought he was going to land on Tony Luna's roof. He was very low for about 15 minutes. I could see the guy's eye color. They were that low. And I thought, does the city give those permits? Did they have a permit to do that? Is that legal? And I thought, there's no way. And they acted like they were in a big hurry to do their filming and leave. And I thought about that, and I felt more resentful that I was initially scared that these are the police and they're looking for some bad people, and then to realize they're there to film. Well, you know what? There's that wonderful skate I don't know who owns it, I don't know the name of it, but that huge one out on Vista Grande, you know, out in the acreage, there's that huge one out there they can enjoy. I've driven out there many times to look at it. And that park is in a wonderful location. But the one on Oak is just too close to our residences. I really do resent the noise.
Very good. Thank you. Alec Beck. Followed by Connie Brown.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alec Beck. I am a resident of Vista. I work for the Skate Park Project, formerly known as the Tony Hawk Foundation. We help communities, public agencies, local advocates, young and old, develop viable public skate park projects in their town. It's always nice to see a council chamber packed full with people who care about issues on both sides. This is the democratic dream. But thank you for hearing this out today. I want to bring up a couple points. In those moments where we're helping public agencies work through the process of developing a public skate park, and shout out to Vista for having 30,000 square feet of skatable space that's public and state-of-the-art. But you know more than anybody how tricky this is to navigate stakeholders' desires and the needs of the people. What we've found over time is that there's always a compromise. There's always some sort of way to navigate this process collectively. I do want to touch on Greg's points about economic impact. Of course, my wife is an Olympian, an Olympic skateboarder. She chose to go to college here because of the access to these vert ramps. In terms of the social impact and the cultural significance, we know that now know that the USC demonstrated that skateboarding and other action sports provide the athletic, the CDC recommended cardiovascular exercise, as well as the social, emotional benefits that come from this. They're basically profound. In terms of the industry standard height, like they said, vert ramps are very tall. They're usually, the average is about 13 feet tall. Tony Hawk, San Diego's own legendary Tony Hawk, does have a private training facility within his building in the business district, but that's a 13.5-foot tall ramp. In terms of beginner versus expert, Tony did the 900, right? He was famous for that very, very famous trick. You know how old the most recent person to do a 900 is these days? 9 years old. There are 9-year-olds doing 900s on ramps that large. Now, that doesn't mean a 9-year-old who has no experience skateboarding or somebody my age who has no experience skateboarding should step onto a vert ramp on the top. They can start at the bottom and work their way back and forth and work their way up. Nobody in their right mind is going to step on the top of a cliff and jump down it without knowing what they're doing. And of course, there needs to be fencing, that sort of things. So another point I'd like to address, skateboarding is not unsafe. It's a common misconception. Statistically, is 1/10 as dangerous as basketball, according to ER visits across the country. So that's just a misconception that we deal with all the time in council meetings and public skate park projects across the country. It's not as unsafe as people might think it is. The factors that we're considering here are noise and sight lines for the most part, correct? Those are the complaints, and shout out to the people who have come out and have made these complaints. It takes a lot of courage to come out and say, hey, I don't like this in my neighborhood, I want to find a way around it. But 2001 Portland Police study about skate parks has shown that skate parks average around the same noise levels as balls hitting bats, that type of thing. More importantly, instead of a blanket regulation, we should be focused on communication and compromise to figure out, hey, we really only need to skate a couple hours a day for the most part, if that. What works for you and your schedule? Can we work this out? Can we be good neighbors in this town? That's a big part of it, and I think it's a big part of remembering why we moved to this area in the first place. So events are another story. You need to work on that. I suggest we compartmentalize these factors: events, hours, sound, and including chances to mitigate the sound effectively. We deal with this all the time in public skate parks across the country. And visibility, of course. There are ways to get around that. Get around it is the right way, but to address it so everybody's needs are taken into account. And finally, I just try not to make it cost prohibitive. These ramps are expensive. They're investing in their community. If it costs $9,000 to get a permit for this stuff, that's a lot. all in all, I appreciate you all taking the time to consider these perspectives, and I think that with further cooperation and communication, there are some ways that we can figure out the ideal scenario and find a compromise for all the stakeholders. Thanks.
Thank you, Alec. Connie Brown?
Hi, my name's Connie Brown. I live at 1282 Oak. My property and my master bedroom is in direct line to the ramp. This is a multifaceted issue. It isn't just parking. It isn't just noise. It isn't just that it's a business being run in a residential neighborhood, I believe, with no permits on that. It isn't just the houses were built in 1958. They have no insulation in the walls. It's not just not being able to live in your backyard, but not being able to live in the far side of your house, in your master bedroom. For me personally, I bought my home a little over a year ago. I went to pull in with my trailer. I couldn't. It was the day of one of their large events. Oak Drive has Oak Knoll Drive. That is a private drive. That is not respected. We have tried to compromise. We've asked for limited hours. We've asked for less noise. We have asked the sheriff to come out, and we have incident reports. We have asked them to move their cars. This is not something that's just suddenly appearing for us. I love skate culture. I was involved in the water sports community in Oceanside for quite a while. I have nothing against the culture, the outside activity, wonderful. But this isn't the place for it. It's, unfortunately, for this residential neighborhood, it makes it unpleasant to be in your backyard or your house. This happens 6 days a week, plus the large events. So it's something that you kind of don't get a break from, which wears on you over time. I know they talked about economic impact. You're right, it's going to impact me when I sell my house and others. There's quite strict disclosure laws in California for real estate. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. I don't know how to wrap it up, but there's so many issues. And unfortunately, if it was a smaller ramp below a fence line that was more in line what I would think of a playground equipment that didn't generate all these issues, I'm not sure I'd be opposed to it. But the way that the ramp stands right now, I hope there is an issue that can be resolved, and I appreciate you guys working on it. That's all.
Thank you. Ruby Louie, followed by Donald Pease, I'm sorry.
Whoa, this is scary. Hi, my name is Ruby Lilly, and I skate in X Games and compete in a lot of contests like Considered Pro, and I have spent a lot of my time, mostly all of it, skating at a lot of backyard vert ramps, like all of them, and they're absolutely amazing, so good for the community, and it's really helped me with like mental, physical strength, emotional, like everything, and just can't thank all the skateboarders enough. It's like, I moved from the East Coast all the way to here because of this reason, because there's the best backyard vert ramps and skate parks, and this is the area for it. And I am training for the Olympics for 2024, and I spend a lot of my time training in these backyard vert ramps, so I think that it really should stay here so bad. And also, I think for like maybe all the neighbors, they should try skateboarding and get in the community, and I think they really, really enjoy it. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you, Ruby. Donald Pease.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to say anything at all. A lot of different angles or approaches to, even understanding the full scope of what should change, what needs to change. But I'm a professional photographer. I own a production company here out of Vista. Moved here to Vista for the opportunity that it provides in specifically extreme sports. When we hear about the X Games or just private or personally different athletes that skateboard, BMX, scooter, I spend all day, every day, photographing, documenting them. And Vista is the best concentration of the future of skateboarding, especially when it comes to vert ramps. And that is because of the ramps that are available to the select and few really prestigious riders that get the opportunity to put their wheels on those ramps. It isn't as open access as I feel like it's being perceived. It very much is not, as they have, I believe, addressed pretty well. The future is here, and I think for every one person that has ever moved to Vista for the views, there's more, 3 to 4 that have moved for the views and the opportunities that pertain to culture, skateboarding, being outside and around what these extreme sports are and how they're developing here in North County, San Diego, Vista being a really pinnacle part of that. I manage a team of veteran photographers and filmmakers, cinematographers that follow a lot of the athletes that travel around the world with different Olympic teams to document them and their progression. And I guess I don't have too much to say other than a lot of the complaints are manageable and not to be taken away from the overall impact that has brought so many people, or the overall scope of what has brought so many people here today in Vista, or to Vista here today. Vista's today is bigger than it ever has been before, and we can thank the culture of extreme sports, largely, from the X Games to all the riders that push themselves to world-class limits to be here, and that's all I've really got. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, my last speaker slip. I believe the first name starts with an A and the last name starts with an R. Other than that, I'm not really very good. And you are?
My name is Alan Richardson.
Alan Richardson.
Yeah. As if you could keep your eyes open for my son, he's probably gonna be mad at me for being up here. But I have a son who's been skateboarding since he was 8 years old, and he's 30 now. And he loves it. He absolutely loves skateboarding. He used to go to a place in Carlsbad called Black Box. And at 8 years old, we'd take him up there, drop him off. It's in an industrial area. He would skateboard for several hours. He'd come home. I'm not against skateboarding. I love it. It's been good for my son. It's helped him with his issues. I am against where it's located and what's going on there, because I've been there myself and seen the trash there and the lack of parking facilities. And as a parent, I would like more security there. Also, I looked at the structural. How has it been, who engineered it? Who put the structural engineering together where it's at? Because it's just planted there. So those are all concerns I have as a parent. But I think skateboarding is great. As I've been an educator for the past 30 years. I've worked at high schools and continuation schools, and I find that anything physical you can get kids into is all beneficial, absolutely. Also, as a counselor working with drug and alcohol people, it's also been very helpful there too. I spent a few years over at Choices, okay? I think that anything we can do to keep our kids focused is so important. I'm not against skateboarding at all. What I am is it needs to be in a industrial park. That way people, it'll be out of the way. It won't be up against the wall. And it was really tragic to see that because it is such a great sport that this is actually hurting the sport. That's all I had to say. Any questions at all?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Mr. Richardson. All right, that's my last speaker slip. We're going to close this portion of the meeting, and so I'm not going to let anybody else talk this evening except for the commissioners and staff. All right? Okay. Commissioners, first let me go back and comment on Mr. Payne's comment about Vista. Those of you that are old enough to remember the Huntley-Brinkley report on NBC, they did a 5-minute segment on Vista, as one of the best places and most affordable places to live. This was back in the early 70s. And I think the city has a copy of it somewhere in the file. So anyway, so that just an aside on Mr. Payne's comment. So where would you like to go? Commissioner Hastings.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. They're many and varied. This was really educational to understand the significance of these particular ramps. I hadn't understood Vista's prominence as a extreme sports town. One of the things that concerns me here is, and I think part of this is for when we think about how to regulate this stuff, is when we're talking about this sport, are we talking about recreation or are we talking about professionals and the kind of training they need? And it seems to me that skateboarding doesn't seem to have much of a line drawn in it, but that many sports do. So is there a need to make a distinction for the whatever kinds of regulations we propose between facilities that are for professionals and aspiring professionals? I understand that there are people who get trained, kids who are being trained, but I feel like the comments that were given today talked a lot about how wonderful all this was, but it kind of left all that really open. So I have that's where I am right now.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Aguilar.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Burnquist, is his property in the city of Vista?
No, it's in the county.
It's in the county? Because I remember we dealt with that a few years ago. I don't remember exactly what the deal was then, but...
We did not have a discussion item on Mr. Burnquist's property because it's not located within the city limits.
Okay.
It is adjacent to a proposed project that is asking to annex into the city the Kawano application.
Right. Okay, that's what it was. How many, so we've discussed Tony Hawk has a facility here in Vista. I remember another facility that was built out in a business park. I don't know if it still exists.
Correct. Mr. Hawk has a facility that's a training facility that's inside a building in the Vista Business Park. There was a recreational ramp facility that was opened, I don't know, 10 years ago or so.
Right.
It's no longer in place.
Yeah, 'cause I was there for the
both in
opening.
the business park.
What do you want, ideas or?
Sure.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that I see here, one is how we view property rights and how we enjoy our properties. And I believe everybody has the right to enjoy their property, but without infringing on their neighbors and their property rights. I clearly see here that we've got a business that's being run here. Apparently there are other businesses that provide the same opportunities to have access to ramps and things of that nature. The difference is that those businesses have either leased a property specifically for this, pay taxes to the city, to the state. You know, these are businesses that are being run out of a backyard, and I'm pretty familiar with this. I've seen this done not with skating, but with other sports. A lot of people try to use their backyard to train, whether it's for baseball or even football. I've seen that, and basketball. But it does seem like this sport seems to attract a lot more people at one time, particularly the events, right? I mean, 150 people showing up at an event, invited people, that's a lot. And, you know, I don't know about the helicopter. I'm sure that was probably a one-time thing, maybe. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, we've got people parking on people's private property. I believe Oak Knoll is a private street. Sounds like there's some trash issues that are going on. These are things that could have been handled, I think, in the past, but they were not addressed. So, you know, I think these types of facilities in a neighborhood should be limited in height. I know the one gentleman doesn't like looking at his naked neighbor or whatever, but that's because he's on a ramp looking down on her. So, I mean, you know, that's the problem we're having here is we're infringing on other people's private property, what they do in their homes. So I think I don't have a problem with skateboarding. When I was a kid, I skateboarded at our first skate park, which was shut down pretty quickly, actually, here in the city of Vista back in the 70s. So not a problem with it. But I do believe there's a place and a time for it. I think I would prefer to see a limit on the height of ramps. Well, I would say 6 foot. I mean, fence heights are supposed to be limited to 6 foot. You know, I know that someone mentioned about somebody standing on top of the, yeah, I get that, but I mean, at least that ramp is somewhat out of sight for the neighbors. Because if I'm standing on a ladder at my house, my neighbor's gonna see me too, so, I mean, I think 6 foot's pretty good. We have to compromise, and I don't think it's a good idea to run a business out of a backyard. I mean, earlier we were talking about insurance, umbrella policies, things of this nature. I really don't think the city should be involved in even requiring, I mean, if they have to require that, you know, these businesses belong somewhere else, like a real business is run.
Very good. Commissioner Garrettson.
I spent 12 years on the Parks and Rec Commission, and one of the first things that we had to deal with was skate parks. So most of that time, we were focusing on trying to build new skate parks because they closed the one up the hill here. So I've been a strong advocate of skate parks and so forth since I've lived in Vista almost for 30 years. But what I heard tonight was we have a privacy issue, we have a parking issue, we have a noise issue, we have an issue with the size of the events. We have an issue with the number of hours people are skating. We have a potential problem with setbacks, the height, porta potties, running a business, trash, security, and none of those seem to have been addressed by the people with the skate parks. And since they haven't addressed it, and it's gotten to be this bad for the neighbors, and they have a right for privacy. So in my opinion, something needs to be done. So the idea of no action, for me, is not an option.
Okay. Commissioner Grimm.
Unfortunately, my physical experience with skateboards are basically nailing up old pair of roller skates to a 2x4, so that's kind of where I'm coming at. But I did when my daughter was in college, she had a roommate whose father was, and I know Alec would know who this guy is, he was the original guy that built the X Games ramps. He did ramps in Saudi Arabia and was considered one of the premier builders of skate ramps. And I remember sitting around talking to him one time, and he said, "I can build them as high and as big as you want them." I'm sorry. Probably wasn't worth hearing anyway, but that's okay. So the point is they can pretty much build anything that anybody asks for, so they can get, very, very large. And I think Commissioner Aguilar touched on this, but really it comes down to me zoning. I mean, what is zoning about? residential zoning, the primary use of residential zoning is for residences. And anything that might be incompatible with that should require a special permit. And so the question is, if we do a special, like a, special use permit, a minor one, then I guess where do you draw the line is the question I'm having a little bit more trouble with. At what size do you require that? Because I do think, I'm not for totally eliminating them, because I do think there's some properties in town that are big enough where, and located enough where it works. But I think to be able to control that, you need to have some kind of a discretionary permit. So that's, and when you have that discretionary permit, you can tailor the conditions to that property, whatever it might need. You could also require other things like insurance and some of the other things, noise studies, some of the other things we required. I'm a little bit concerned about the price. The price is, for that permit, I think was $3,300, something like that for a minor permit. I don't know if that's something, if council got that far, they'd want to look at it. It may be reducing that. But anyway, to me, it's something that when you start getting into these bigger ramps, it really does need some kind of a discretionary permit. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on this.
Commissioner Savage.
There we go. I actually have a quick question about minor use permits. When that goes to the zoning administrator, can a requirement be insurance, maintenance, scheduled maintenance, things like that? Can that be part of the minor use permit?
Yes, the commission or the decision-making body can impose conditions related to insurance requirements, security, maintenance. It's kind of open game in terms of the operation of the actual facility.
Okay, so the minor use, then we could put that on there and kind of get this wish list that we're kind of discussing here.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just a couple comments. This is a professional environment that's being created by this. Obviously, there's some business aspects to what's going on here. This is a community, and I know that you guys would find areas that you could go to, different backyards, if one person's home does not facilitate this. I don't think that this needs to be something that's free game. I think that this can be regulated, especially because these are in backyards that, we regulate a lot of stuff. And it's, it sheds. So I feel like this is an impact to the neighbors. So, and some properties won't have that. Some properties are going to be perfect for this. And I think with a community this large, I think there's some backyards that are going to fit and some that won't. And I think that it's our responsibility to identify what locations work and what don't. I don't think we can leave this up to the public discretion. I think this has to be something that comes before someone. But I'm sure there's backyards that people can procure. If this is something that needs to happen in your guys' community, the professional skateboarding community, it is $3,000, but this is the professional expense. I think this fits with what's going on here. This isn't kids, putting together a skateboarding ramp because they watch Tony Hawk videos. I think there's some level of professionalism. I think that can happen. I think that $3,000 is reasonable to get access to this. And I think because the public access, and we've all kind of mentioned this a little bit, we do need to regulate. I have a wish list for the MUP. I would say that getting soundproofing in the ramps, requiring some level of insurance. I'm not an insurance person. I don't know what that would be exactly required, but some level of professional insurance, events being limited, parking being taken into account for the address that submits the MUP, and then the hour limits. I think limiting when the hours when these can take place. I don't think lighting would be a problem because I don't think that evening hours should be part of that. So that's kind of my wish list, and that's kind of my comments on this. I know that we're going to try and pass something. We're passing something to City Council, recommendations.
Providing direction, yes, which we'd bring back in a formal code amendment to the Planning Commission.
Okay, so yeah, some way or another, those are kind of my notes that I'd like to pass on when we do that, so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Looney.
Thank you. John, many years ago when I started my own business, I worked out of my home, and there were several conditions that I had to meet in order to have my home business. Could you give me kind of an update on what guidelines are, city guidelines are in operating a home business today?
Of course. So if you're going to operate a business out of your home, you have to obtain a business license and what we call a home occupation permit. And a home occupation permit is essentially a review of the activities that you're going to do with the business by the planning department to determine if it's going to impact surrounding properties. So typically it's people that have professional jobs that they're going to do inside their house, like an architect or engineer or an accountant, or some educational use that would have a limit on the number of people and the time. So under our home occupation ordinance, you're allowed to use your property within certain parameters, but you're limited to like one person at a time for teaching purposes, and it's no more than 4 a day. For a skate ramp, it's not something that we would issue a home occupation permit for because it, by its very nature, could disturb the surrounding property. So none of the existing ramps have home occupation permits to operate a business out of their property.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Aguilar?
I think I would like to have lighting addressed. Simply, I know that it's not a problem right now, but could be in the future, and that could be a nuisance.
We could limit the hours of operation so lighting isn't an issue.
But in the wintertime.
But,
everything-
yeah, I mean, it's still, I think lighting needs to be addressed. I'm not exactly sure how, but I think, you know, again, in certain neighborhoods, I just think it's not going to be appropriate at all to have, you know, lighting till 10 o'clock at night. In other parts of our city, I think it is acceptable.
All right. So, in my notes, note-taking for, excuse me, the commission's comment, we're leaning towards recommending to staff that we do a discretionary approval, a minor use permit. We limit the height of the ramps to 6 feet. Did we want to do anything about additional setbacks? I believe right now the setbacks are 5 feet. I would think.
Can we go back to just a second? You said we wanted to limit the height to 6 feet.
That was Commissioner Aguilar's.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm with that because some
Okay.
properties may.
So
have big
what we're recommending here is that you define a height limit over which a minor use permit would be required, and under a height would not require a minor use permit or would be, you know, permissible under the current rules. So what the staff is recommending is 6 feet based on the average fence height, but the commission could determine where they wanted to draw that line.
If that was the intent of it, I'm okay. So you still could go above 6 feet, but with this permit.
You'd have to obtain a minor use permit if you built a ramp over 6 feet.
Thank you. Like to hear from the student commissioners if we could.
I just wanted to quickly mention that I Googled it real quickly, and these ramps are really expensive, so I don't see them being a growing issue in the future. Like, it's a major investment to make these sort of projects, so in a way, it feels like any legislation we make today is specifically for the two houses that already exist. So I think it feels, it would apply elsewhere, but I don't foresee it continuing to grow a lot. So in that light, I think it's important that we ensure that the existing sort of grandfathering type deal applies for the 3 years or so that is given. That way they have time to move their investment elsewhere or something like that. So I think shortening that would be a mistake and would hurt the property owners without consideration of that.
Thank you, Peter.
Hi. I believe that with like anything, the skate ramps do need limitations, and everyone just really needs to compromise about what they want. And so everyone, I just think that everyone should have a win-win, and maybe just limiting hours and being a little bit more considerate about parking. And I mean, I feel like if they figure out some sort of schedule, it should all work out in the end. But I mean, also moving to another location just so everyone's comfortable.
Thank you, Kasani. All right. Charlie? Or Commissioner Grimm?
I just had, I guess, a question for staff. It was a comment that Peter, our student commissioner, one of our student commissioners, brought up. The idea of the grandfathering. Is it possible to work some kind of an agreement where you'd allow that 3-year grandfather? Oh, I'm sorry, that's on. I guess I'm just soft. Okay. Where you could grandfather it, but could we work something where you grandfather it? We'd agree to 3 years if there were conditions on it, for example, hours or something to give the neighbors a little bit of relief. As the other student commissioner said, maybe do some kind of compromise. Is that something we can do?
So uses that are allowed under the law at the time of a zoning change that makes them then non-conforming are considered vested and grandfathered by their very nature. So there's nothing we would do to create that. It's just if we change the law and they are permitted. So if they are in violation of the zoning code today, they're not grandfathered, but assuming they're allowed, they would be. What the student commissioner was speaking to is the amortization period, which by default today is the 3-year period under our code. We can take a look at our office, working with staff, whether there's another standard that would be appropriate for these, taking into account, of course, the investment that's made. Courts have looked at, based on the facts, what is appropriate in given cases, and we can look for, corollaries there. We can even look for a graduated schedule in terms of the amount of investment for the structure and the amount of time that they'd be allowed under the grandfathered status.
But you couldn't really condition that amortization. I'm sorry, God, I thought this was better microphones. We couldn't really condition the amortization.
No, because under the law, they would get that grandfathered vested right automatically, assuming, again, that they're a allowed use that is in conformance with the laws that stands today.
But what we could do is evaluate the amortization period that we're going to recommend as part of our code amendment and report back to you what your options are in terms of amortization. I think what the assistant city attorney is saying is we're not stuck with 3 years automatically. We can look at what other options there are when we bring back the formal amendment.
All right. Commissioner Garrison?
Yes, have you written down and listed all the things that we're requesting?
I have attempted to. I think I have it.
All right, could you read that so we can add things as?
Sure, I will do that. Let me check with Commissioner Hastings to see.
I was thinking about since anything that we suggest would have the grandfathered in locations, which are right now, the locations at issue, right? So one thing I'm wondering about is where the action comes to provide the neighbors with some relief. How do we take care of that?
So that would be us amending the code and then waiting for the amortization period to run before we could enforce the requirements that you're adopting. That's the only option we have at this point.
And
I could
code
add,
enforcement.
Assuming if there is a code violation that exists today, there could always be a code enforcement.
Yes, so we do have an active code enforcement case on one of the properties, and I'm sure you heard from a number of the neighbors tonight, which we are currently working on and we will continue to enforce.
Thank you.
Commissioner Aguilar?
If I can ask, does that code enforcement have to do with business licensing or just something else?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then would it be possible to, regarding the grandfathering and the sunsetting, bifurcate you know, the structure from the business as far as the amortization?
So any of these residential properties that are currently operating a business with a skate park are in violation of the code today, so they would not be considered grandfathered due to that
Okay.
reason.
Thank you.
Okay, here's what I have. We're going to recommend, or ask staff to prepare an ordinance that would require a minor use permit for anything above 6 feet. And I think we want to limit that to 13 feet that we heard from Mr. Beck. We're going to require soundproofing, insurance. We're going to limit events and their size. I'm not quite sure how we're going to address parking, but we're concerned about parking as hours of operation, lighting, and setbacks, and a 3-year amortization for non-conforming uses. Commissioner Garrettson?
Non-conforming structures.
Right.
I think I'd like to see some limits on porta potties. I think that could create some major issues with the neighbors. Also, hours of operation, number of days per week, hours of operation. I don't know if you said that. And parking. So that's it.
Okay. Let's call it public sanitation.
I'm sorry, can I address on? What do you mean by the porta potties? Less?
There was mention in a number of the letters that these people who are running the skate parks were bringing in porta potties
Okay.
when they have the big events. To me, that's a sanitation issue that needs to be addressed, especially where they put them.
But I would think you'd want the porta potties there, otherwise you have.
I'm just saying, address that issue
Okay.
somehow, where they go and,
Sure.
you know, the professionalism of those mechanisms.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Looney?
One of the other items that has been brought up by neighbors are the sight lines, and we may want to add some landscape screening. If these structures are 5 feet off the property line and they exceed 6 feet in height, I think we may want to address some landscape screening from the adjacent properties.
Okay. Commissioner Savage?
Oh, whoops. I would also just want to mention an aesthetic, if it is visible by neighbors, and maintenance periods for the surface of the skate ramp. I imagine they last probably a long time, but I'm not knowledgeable. I just started Googling it. But yeah, probably something we want to mention about what it looks like and how it's taken care of.
Okay. Very good. Any other comments? All right. So John, here's what we're asking you to address. We're going to say that skateboard ramps that are higher than 6 feet have a maximum height of 13 feet. They will require a minor use permit. They will address landscaping and screening of neighbors. The ramps will be soundproofed. The operator will be required to have insurance. We will address events and their size. We'll address parking, hours of operation, both days and nights, lighting, setbacks for the ramps. I was thinking the higher the ramp, the greater the setback. And then a 3-year the 3-year grandfathering for nonconforming structures, and then in the use permit, we're going to want to know what it's going to look like and how it's going to be maintained. Okay?
Very good.
You need to vote on that?
Motion and a vote would be great.
Okay. Commissioner Garrettson?
Yes. How about the business license? If they're running a business, that there needs to be a business license.
I don't know that they should be running a business out of the backyard. I'm having a real hard time with that part of it. It shouldn't be a business. This should be,
But maybe they should have the right to apply.
if they're going to run it as a business, it belongs in a commercial or in the industrial park.
So if they were to apply for a business license, they would have to obtain a HOP, a home occupation permit, and the current rules under our HOP requirements would prohibit us from issuing a permit for that use unless we were to change our home occupation requirements.
Okay.
Okay? Since I presented the list, I'll make a motion that we direct staff to prepare an ordinance amendment to address the items that I just covered. Would someone like to second that motion? Commissioner Savage?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to direct staff to prepare an ordinance addressing skate ramps in the city. All in favor, cast your vote. And lock it in. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break, so you folks...
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, could we explain the process that's going to happen so
Okay.
people would know
Sure.
what's going to happen from here and how they can provide input at some point?
We have directed staff to come back to the Planning Commission with an ordinance amendment that we're going to recommend to the City Council. So there will be another public hearing. There will be a public hearing on this issue, and you'll be afforded an opportunity to comment on the ordinance. If you have additional comments that you think are relevant to what staff is doing, I would invite you to provide that information to the staff so they can consider it. We'll come back here to the Planning Commission. We'll have a public hearing on the proposed ordinance. You'll get an opportunity to testify again, and we'll make a recommendation to the City Council, and then there will be another public hearing at the City Council to adopt that amendment to our zoning ordinance. Okay? Very good. 5 minutes, and we'll be back.
To whoever.
there's nobody from Maryland here tonight that spoke. It was complete Eric Drive people. So there's two operators here. One is very responsible and one is very not responsible, and that's the problem. He's not. That's the problem. Well, he's got some neighbors. He's got some neighbors that he's worked a solution out with that are okay with it, but he's got some that he hasn't. And those are the folks that spoke tonight. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. It was good. I appreciate it. That went a lot better than I thought it would. So thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, thanks, Peter.
I got a question.
Never as boring, is it? Yeah.
That is not something I ever expected to discuss.
Yeah, no doubt.
Always thought it was going to be like storefronts.
You never know what's going to come to play, right?
Let's keep this skateboarding thing there real quick.
Edward R. Morrow?
Yes. That was it.
Just came out of the blue.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to reconvene our meeting here, so if you have a discussion going on, you're invited to take it to the hallway. Thanks for coming tonight, and everybody behaved. I appreciate it. All right, we will reconvene, and let me extend my apologies to Mr. Salcido for switching things up tonight, but we got an empty room tonight, so that there is some benefit. Mr. Winters, your staff report, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rossler and Commissioners. Chris Winters presenting the project for the public hearing item tonight, which is a request for a special use permit to establish a banquet hall, which would be a large assembly use within an existing commercial shopping center located at 917 East Vista Way. The project location is the Vista Marketplace. The overall project site has a total land area of approximately 4.5 acres. Existing land uses consist of retail sales and services that include a bargain store, a laundromat, a massage business, nail salon, auto insurance, a dentist, and a learning center. A portion of the suites are vacant. The general plan and zoning designations are commercial neighborhood or CN under the general plan, and the zoning is consistently established as C1 commercial zone. This slide shows a site plan for the overall shopping center with the particular suite in question for the banquet hall shaded to the right-hand side of the screen. The overall building structures consist of 5 adjacent buildings that total just under 60,000 square feet. The shopping center maintains 234 parking stalls overall. Based on the current code requirement, a neighborhood shopping center like this would require 4 parking stalls per 1,000 square feet of gross building area. The site has, that would be a requirement for 238 stalls, and the site is deficient 4 parking stalls, which would be about 1.7% of the total under the current code. The site plan, or the floor plan, shows the suite for the proposed use that the special use permit would apply to for the banquet hall. It would be rented for events including wedding receptions, corporate parties, special birthdays, and similar events. The total suite area is 8,157 square feet. A proposed, approximately half of that would be open floor space for the banquet area. There would be a 1,810 square foot storage area for tables, chairs, decorations, and so on. The floor plan includes 472 square feet of office space and a bridal room. And there's also a kitchen area for use by caterers. The kitchen area would not be equipped with cooking equipment, but is basically a prep area for any caterers that come in and operate at the venue. On the next slide are some more operational details. The applicant has proposed primarily weekend and weeknight uses after 6 p.m. for the events. The proposed closing time is to conclude any event no later than 1 a.m. Daytime use of the office space would be for discussing potential rental with clients, managing the building and so on, cleanup and those related event activities. Private security would be employed for all events. There would be no ticketed events like concerts and that type of thing. No alcoholic beverages sales would be provided by the venue. If there were any alcohol provided, it could be as a bring your own event by a family that rented the establishment, or by ABC licensed caterers would be another possibility. Maximum occupancy would be set at 300 people inclusive of the business staff. This slide takes another look at the parking. As mentioned earlier, the required parking for the center would technically be 238 stalls under the existing development code, and the site has 234 stalls, so it's deficient by 4. That likely occurred by the addition of a few more accessible spaces in front of the suites over the last 50 plus years that the center has existed, as well as the installation of landscape improvements over the years, and there were some building extensions during that time frame as well. The applicant has provided analysis of their use and anticipates a need for approximately 102 parking stalls for the banquet hall alone. In consideration of the total amount of parking, the off-peak hours of operation for the banquet hall for the event, the maximum occupancy that would be set at 300 people, and the current underutilization of the parking area for the center as a whole, staff supports granting this minor modification to the required parking under the special use permit as allowable under the development code. Project conditions, key items include that there would be no increase in occupancy or expansion of the use unless approved through an amendment to the special use permit. All doors and windows must remain closed during any events. The project is subject to the city's noise ordinance and any complaints. The hours of operation for events, hall rental would be limited to between 6 p.m. to no later than 1 a.m. on weekdays. Earlier events may be scheduled on weekends. All events shall conclude no later than 1 a.m. These are the hours proposed by the applicant. The applicant has relayed to staff that they would typically have approximately 3 events per week. Private security shall be provided on site during any events, and the hall shall not be rented or utilized for ticketed for-profit type events. Staff's recommendation, the project is exempt from environmental review under CEQA. It would only involve the addition of minor interior tent improvements, no exterior improvements. The assembly use is allowable, subject to approval of a special use permit, and conditions of approval have been included to ensure compatibility with the surrounding uses. Staff supports the request for modification of the parking requirement based on the factors outlined in the staff report. And therefore, the recommendation is to grant the special use permit to establish the banquet hall, allow the large assembly use within the existing commercial center at 917 East Vista Way. The project applicant, Marco Salcido, is here to answer any operational questions, and staff is available as well. That concludes my presentation.
Very good. Any questions of staff? Commissioner Looney?
Could you pull up that floor plan once more, please? In the banquet hall, the reason I'm asking this question is because it was mentioned that there were no exterior modifications. If the floor plan is correct, they're not going to meet egress requirements with only the doors on the back side. So there may need to be some studies on emergency egress out of that banquet hall.
Okay.
Again, your building department's going to know the code better, but for a public meeting place, that may not meet code. So just kind of a heads up on that.
Plans will have to be submitted for the tenant improvements. They'll be reviewed by our building division, and a grant of occupancy will be required.
I don't have any issues even if there are modifications made to the exterior, but it's just one of those things I saw.
I think today I might have noticed the north arrow might have been depicted wrong on the building, but the front entrance is on the top side of the slide, in case that was the concern.
Okay. Commissioner Grimm?
I just had two questions. One was the sheriff or whoever reviewed it, were they okay with the 1 a.m. closure on weekdays?
I just double checked in the conditions. The sheriffs didn't make any comments on the hours of operation. All of the comments were related to securing the facility, locking doors, adequate lighting, site maintenance, with a recommendation that a condition be included for private security for all events.
Okay. Second question, also it says that the venue operator will not sell alcohol. Does that mean that they're, let's say I rented it and I wanted to sell alcohol. I'm not the guy that owns it, but I'm a guy that's renting it. Could I sell alcohol within there, or there's no alcohol sales at all?
Not be able to sell alcohol legally.
Okay. You could give it away, but
it could be given away or brought by the guests for that private event.
Okay, great, thank you.
Caterer could be hired for the event as well. If any caterer was hired, they would have a yearly caterer's license. They would have to renew with ABC, and for any specific event, they have to apply for a one-day permit.
Okay. Commissioner Aguilar?
I'm surprised the sheriff overlooked that. I mean, family members bringing alcohol to serve to whoever they want, it doesn't make sense to me. I think it should be ABC licensed caterers. I mean, ABC licensed people serving. I mean, do we have events, other places like that where I could show up and bring my own beer and serve it to my 18-year-old, 19-year-old daughter?
Well,
I mean, this is not my home. This is.
If someone were to do so, they would obviously be in violation of law. But I did speak.
But see, that's the thing, is we don't have a licensed person here. We have just Joe Blow, Joe Public.
Yeah, when I spoke to an agent with ABC approximately 2 weeks ago, I was informed, I was asking similar questions, and they said basically for that type of event, there is no type of license that they can issue, so it's not subject to their licensing.
But we can limit, I mean, they're asking for a special use permit, right?
Correct.
So we can limit that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have two speaker slips, Terry Storm and Marco Salcido. Do you have anything else that you want to talk to us about, provide us with?
I think it would be good to kind of address.
Hello. I think that this family's been involved with this type of thing for quite a while in different locations. And I think they have a specific answer to your question. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about how you deal with the alcohol issue.
Yeah, I'm here with my dad. He's been running a business similar to this for over a couple of years. It's served by someone who can, but it's not provided by us, or it's provided by them and just served by someone that can serve. So
So, but there's an ABC licensed caterer. How does that work?
I guess the way it works, because when you see the AB license, there's no type of license for that. So it's that they bring it, and then someone who's the catering serves the alcohol who's licensed.
Okay.
I mean, I think I understand what he's saying, but I'm not necessarily in agreement, so.
If I could, at least, and this may be everyone's understanding based on what he said, but it sounds like the issue, what he's describing is just who is buying and bringing the alcohol to the venue. So whether the caterers are supplying the alcohol or the customer, but it's the caterer in all instances that's actually serving the alcohol, if that makes sense.
That, I understand. I mean, that makes sense to me, but that's not the way it read in the
And if that's not reflected in the conditions, that could be what
wasn't
the
reflected in the
commission.
report.
Could I ask, we didn't get a signature by him, but by his father to come up and say how they actually run their business this way?
He can come up and speak, I
Yeah,
guess.
please come on up.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. We always require a caterer with ABC license, and also we have the proper train from ABC to how to serve the liquor or beer. We never serve liquor to a minor, so you must sure that we never serve to a minor, because we are family. We also know what is our commitment to the society, and we try to keep this business as a family, because there's a quinceañeras, there's a bat mitzvahs, there's a lot of celebration in the different cultures, but we always be sure that it's always in a family ambience.
Yeah, and the question isn't whether you serve liquor. I was never implying that you would be serving liquor to minors, but the way it read in the agenda report is that people who rented it could bring their own liquor and serve it.
They don't serve it. They need to.
We need to have that clarified in the agenda is all.
Yes, they need to get a caterer who can, have all the.
So you're
license
okay with
from
that?
ABC.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Chris, could you pull that one page up where that wording was presented?
I don't know if it's in here, though. It's in the agenda.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, are we talking about in the report or on the slides?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Have any other comments for us this evening?
I'd just like, Mark, to maybe just give a little idea of what his goal is and kind of what his mission kind of is with this business. Let me just give a moment there.
Yeah, thank you for having us tonight. I know it's been a long night, so I'm gonna be short on this. The first time I saw my father help business, he was here in Vista 15 years ago, and then we have to move around, and then they move a little upstate and open a business similar to this. So right now that I'm following his footsteps, the first place that I thought of opening a business like this was in Vista, because there's so much culture, there's so much heritage, and you have all these great cities also around that have these types of places for people. And then people are moving to other cities around to go and have their celebrations, their weddings, their quinceañeras. And it would be a really nice place here in Vista, so they could do it right at home, at a safe environment where we can control the security, we can control these other aspects that you wouldn't be normally able to control when they do it at home. Maybe at home, I mean, no one's watching and they can do whatever they want. But if you bring a place like this where you have the control of it, it would just, I would feel much safer if I had an event at a place like this. And that's what we want to provide to the community, a safe environment so they can celebrate their heritage, their love, and all their special celebrations.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioners, what is your pleasure? Commissioner Savage?
Yeah, I think the sentence that I would be looking to change, I think everything else seems fine, except on page 2, we have exactly what we were all talking about. Customers that rent the event space would be allowed to bring alcohol to the event space and share it with their attendees at no charge. I think that just needs to be amended to include that service needs to be bar service or handled by a professional.
Caterer with an ABC license.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Aguilar?
Yeah, I just had a question on the time as well, no later than 1 a.m. Is that, I mean, clean up everything? Okay, so.
Can we ask the operator to come up and answer that?
Yeah, he said
Operational.
yes, so.
Thank you.
Yes, that would be like clean up. We would have everything just wrap up by 1. So how we operate in the other spaces that my family runs, normally by 12:30, there's no more music, there's no more movement, just clean up and people just take
Would it be okay if we put a condition at 12:30, music has to stop and party's over?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Commissioner Grimm?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually take that a little further, what Commissioner Aguilar just said. I'm kind of thinking that on weekdays, everybody should be out of there by 12 midnight. I was thinking about the quinceañera, and I don't know if you want youth, 15-year-old, 16-year-old floating around, at that time on a weeknight. I just think that's a little late on, Monday through Thursday anyway. So, maybe you start cleaning up at 11:30 and get out of there at 12. I don't know, it's an hour. I don't know if it makes a big difference, but I just see there being a difference between Monday through Thursday and Friday, Saturday. So that would be my only comment.
All right.
Commissioners, if I could just add to that, and if you choose to include it in the conditions regarding the hours, the operator let me know that they would end bar service 1 hour to whatever that closing time of the event is. So that can also be reflected in the same condition.
All right.
I'm agreeable to that.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion then? Oh, you guys disappeared. Peter?
Just quick follow-up to Commissioner Grimm's amendment with Monday through Thursday. Under this current arrangement, will we still allow some after midnight activities on Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Aguilar?
I'll make a motion that we accept what's being proposed with a couple of modifications. With the modification of Monday through Thursday, closing time was 11:30 or midnight. Midnight. With Friday, Saturday being the 1 o'clock music terminating 30 minutes before closing time. And alcohol service by licensed ABC servers.
And service ending an hour before closing.
And service ending an hour before, yes.
Oh, we forgot Sunday. Do we want to do Sunday at 12 or Sunday at 1? I'm sorry, I didn't mention.
I would say Sunday at 12.
Sunday at 12.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Garrettson.
I will second the motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the special use permit for the banquet hall with the additional conditions as proposed. Please cast your vote and lock it in. And the motion passes unanimously, so.
Congratulations. Thank you. Much needed service in Vista.
All right, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is reports from the commissioners. Any reports or comments from the commissioners? Mr. Conley? Oh,
I had one, sorry, and
okay.
I'll make it,
Mr. Grimm?
I'll make it quick.
Commissioner Grimm?
Quick. I just noticed that the last few times I've passed the residential project, I don't remember the name of it, at the corner of Mar Vista and South Santa Fe, there's a lot of off-street parking happening at night there that goes clear down to the mortuary. And so-
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, are our standards good enough? Are people not parking in their garages? But it looks like it.
So I think if you look at any multifamily residential project in Vista, including the ones that we've approved in the last 5-6 years, you will see spillover parking on the streets around the project. It's just the nature of the beast. I don't think that's a reflection of our parking standards as much as it is the operation of those projects. A lot of the operators choose to charge for guest parking, or they have arrangements where you get one space with your unit, but extra spaces cost money. They don't have free visitor parking, so there are certain residents that choose not to pay for those permits and choose to park in the surrounding neighborhoods, and that's just something we're dealing with.
And that's probably fine with that location. It's really, the mortuary is closed, most of, I assume, in the evening. And I guess my point is that there may be other areas where it wouldn't be a good thing, where you already have a dense area.
It is something that we are definitely key to, but the rules, they are changing. The state law that just was recently signed by the governor effectively eliminates parking for developments within a half mile of a transit center. So we're going to see the parking issue get much more extreme over the next few years. Any other questions from the commission?
I have one, two.
Commissioner Garrettson? There's several.
Yes, I just need a further clarification on the Tesla charging station over by the theater. I understand that that is a state mandate, that take place, and that Tesla cars only can charge there, but anybody can park there. Please clarify that.
The state requires that we ministerially approve a electric vehicle charging station. So we no longer have a discretionary permit process that we can put these uses through to regulate what kind of cars park there, what it looks like, how it's landscaped, where the infrastructure goes. They go in by right. So Tesla exercised their rights and put in that facility with a ministerial building permit. The charging station only works on Tesla cars. The type of plug that you have, I don't think works on other vehicles, although I've been told there's adapters you can buy, but I generally only see Teslas parked there. Other cars can park there. It's private property, so it's up to the property owner to regulate the parking. If they choose to tow cars that are not electric vehicles there, I believe they can. They're striped and noticed as electric vehicle parking only.
So I can park there with my gas-powered car.
And take the risk of getting towed by the property owner.
By the property owner. But it says, well, I gotcha.
So that's really the key. I don't believe they're enforcing it, but that is at the property owner's discretion.
So it's basically parking for Tesla only.
Yeah.
So the Tesla owners have private parking for the theater.
The idea is that they're going to charge their vehicles while they go and shop in the center, which actually is happening, believe it or not.
Very good.
But he could park his Lucid vehicle there. It's electric,
Yep.
right? So there you go. Park your Lucid car there. My question is Buena Vista. There's a nursery there that's, looks like it's been removed. It's,
Where they're constructing the residential subdivision at the corner of Mar Vista and Buena Vista? Oh,
no.
you're talking about further down Buena
down.
Vista.
Yeah, is that county or is that?
That's county property, and they are in the process of processing a use permit with the county for a cemetery there that's associated with the Catholic Church.
Oh, okay, interesting. And then my other question, any ideas what's going on with the old Marcos on Taylor and Vista Way?
It's for sale. We've had a number of inquiries.
Heard it's been sold.
It may have. It's been for sale for a while. We've had a number of users ask about doing a project there. Street improvements would be triggered for anybody that wants to obtain a
Right.
use permit or modify the facility. and
Nothing's
so
been
nothing's come
processed
to our attention yet.
or even applied. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Looney.
A couple of months ago, there was a comment made where the Vista feed store was required to remove their rooster sale because the neighbors that were living in that newly built subdivision complained. Was that truth or not?
I'm not aware of a city requirement that would allow us to tell them to remove their roosters. They may have done that on their own volition, but there's nothing in our code that limits the feed store from selling roosters if they're in a commercial zone.
It was a comment made by, in a public hearing, and I thought, I just find that kind of interesting when that feed store's been there for decades.
We do have issues with roosters in residential zones. We did
Right.
change our code to prohibit them and allow only chickens, but I haven't heard that you can't sell them at the feed store.
And what's the latest and greatest on the Shell gas station?
We are currently still in litigation with the owner. We're trying to enforce our code to have the station rebuilt. He did demolish the old gas station, but we're still working on trying to get the gas station rebuilt in accordance with the agreement that we have with the owner from last year.
Okay, thanks, John.
Commissioner Grimm?
One last question. The two residential projects that we recommended denial of a couple months ago, sorry, God, you'd think I'd learned by now. The two residential projects that we denied on the north end of town a couple months ago, have those gone to council? What happened on those?
The project on Melrose Way was approved by the city council. The project on Camino Largo, which is off North Santa Fe, is still pending and has not gone before the council yet. No changes made. Patsy's giving me the nod. That's her project.
Costco has gone to perpendicular parking?
Yes, so Costco's modified their parking to accommodate some handicap access that they had to update for the code. So they had to add some handicap spaces, and they're moving their parking around. They're also in the process of getting a use permit amendment to move their gas station over to the west side of the site, and I think that's why they're rearranging the parking right now.
Okay, very good.
It's a mess over there.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Conley this evening?
Just to let you know that we will have a commission meeting on November 1st. We have 2 items. That'll be our only meeting in November, so.
All right. Anything further, commissioners?
Blue Mill Coffee? Wasn't it Blue Mill Coffee? They had a couple of proposed sites, one on Melrose and the other on Vista Way.
Oh, Dutch Brothers. Yeah, so we have one on South Melrose that's going to go into the drive-through center that you approved a while back next to the Hyatt Place. They're processing their construction plans right now. There's one proposed on Hacienda that still needs to come before the commission near the Indian store.
Right.
And there's one proposed in former Bank of America next to Northgate Market, which still is going through planning.
And I think it was called Regents Bank near Alberto's on?
Yes, so they did a TI to redevelop the property and attempt to attract a food use there with the drive-through, but I don't believe we have a tenant yet.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing further, we stand adjourned till November 1st.